So sitting next to me, Latoya, who are you?
Hi, I'm Latoya. I'm parent and also Learning Center One.
And Latoya is going to help me manage the meeting because our vice chair is unfortunately not able to be here. And we wish her well. She lost her father-in-law, and we wish her well as she deals with the pain of that loss. So let's begin with a land acknowledgement. Can you do that for us if they put it up on the screen? Tell me when it's ready. And if we could all rise for the land acknowledgement, tell me when it's up on the screen, please. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's all rise if you're able.
We acknowledge we reside on the lands of the Mississauga of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives.
Thank you. Because we are so jammed, I'm not going to take the time for us all to introduce ourselves. But when people do speak, could you identify whether you're staff and your title the first time? And could you identify if you're a SEAC member when you speak? And if possible, what organization or what part of the city you represent? Let's proceed to approving the agenda. We've circulated an agenda. I know it's tight. I'm going to try to be flexible if we need more time on some items, and if necessary, we'll stretch the end of the meeting. But can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Leo, seconder? Nora, can we have a vote all in favor? Tell me if we have a majority. And online, if you can vote, just raise your hand if you are approving. Leanne, do we have a majority?
Not yet, but.
Could anybody else who might be inclined to approve the agenda, please vote yes so we can get on to the agenda.
Hi, this is Alana. I'm raising my hand, but I can't actually get my hand.
Okay. We've received no objections, so let's proceed as a yes. Are there any conflicts of interest that any SEAC member needs to declare on any issues that are on our agenda? If so, could you say so now? And if not, in silence, I will proceed. Hearing none, we have minutes circulated. Now, Jess kindly caught one typo, which, Leanne, can you just tell everyone what it is, and so we can vote on the minutes as corrected by her revision?
Yes, so the correction was in the budget section where it said that there were items or items that were not under the control of TDSB. It should be, I think we had said no control and it should be under control. Is that right, Jessica?
Yeah, not under the control.
Yeah, it's just missing the word no, which I will add and redistribute. And I think that Nora also had one minor adjustment that I'm going to make.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. So the one adjustment I wanted to make was it makes a statement that I had mentioned that we are not properly funded. I actually used the word resource, and I did that on purpose because it wasn't just about the funds, right?
So
it's about all the resourcing. And so if we could just change the word from funded to resource, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So we're
That's fine.
under-resourced.
Yeah.
With that, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Nora moved it, seconder. Let me guess, Leo. How did I know? Leo has now been voluntold that he is seconding the minutes. All in favor of the minutes? Okay, anybody object? I'm going to treat them as approved. Okay. The housekeeping's over. On to the first substantive issue. The TDSB is conducting a review of special education. They have an internal subcommittee of which TDSB or SEAC is only allowed to have 2 members. So I said it would be great if we could hear every couple of months about what's happening. So we have with us, I believe, online, am I correct? 2 people who are steering the review. And if you could give us a short summary and then give us a chance for people of where you're at so far, so we could, and then I'm going to have our one of our 2 members on the committee from SEAC give a quick summary, and then I want to allocate the rest of the time to SEAC members asking questions or commenting, providing feedback. So Jillian or David?
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. It's Jillian Parekh here. I am faculty at York University, and I'm supporting the TDSB Special Education Review. Thanks so much for having us in tonight. I have just a very brief overview I've prepared, probably about 4 minutes, and then I'm happy to have it over to SEAC members to share and then open it up to questions. So let me just get my notes here. All right. Okay. So since the last time we met, we have completed our system data analysis for students who have an IEP, as well as for students who have been identified as gifted. We are continuing to work with the special education and inclusion team to identify data points that would best capture the experience of students with developmental disabilities that are also widely available from our system perspective. So we'll be following up with SEAC around this piece for sure in future. For the data analysis, I can give you a quick overview of our approach as well as the outcomes. So for the data analysis of students who have an IEP, we controlled for student achievement and then examined the relationship to 3 distinct academic outcomes in relation to 5 special education contexts. So those 5 contexts included students who do not have an IEP, students who are in the regular class with an accommodations only IEP, students who are in the regular class with an IEP that has modified curricular expectations, students who have an IEP and are participating in partially integrated special education classes, and students who have an IEP and are participating in fully self-contained special education classes. And the 3 academic milestones that we used were selected based on 2 points. One was their relationship, or their established relationship, I should say, to post-secondary opportunities and access to future education. And 2, their descriptive capacity in mapping students' trajectories through school. So those 3 milestone pieces include the likelihood of accessing academic level programming in grade 9, the likelihood of accessing 3 or more university level courses in grades 11 and 12, as well as the likelihood of confirming an offer to an Ontario college or university. So for students with IEPs, this excludes students identified as gifted. We examined 3 cohorts, which means that we needed to look at cohorts that are now accessing post-secondary. Although overall achievement has improved across these markers over the years, there was a kind of continued disparity between these 5 educational contexts, which remained largely consistent across the cohorts. The overall trend indicates that students who are participating in self-contained special education classes were more likely to have limited access to grade 9 academic, grades 11 and 12 university level, and post-secondary education, despite their comparison with similarly achieving peers. For the students identified as gifted, we actually couldn't analyze by achievement because we had so few students who were demonstrating low achievement. And overall results showed minimal differences between students who were in self-contained settings versus students who were in a regular class, with a small exception related to accessing post-secondary education. And we do hope to gain further insight from families as to the extent to which students who are identified as gifted are applying and accepting university offers and college offers outside of Ontario, which can somewhat influence these outcomes. But we'll be able to dig into that further when we start speaking with families directly. Overall trends indicate that students identified as gifted fare notably better on all indicators than students who are not involved in special education at all. Okay, we also ran a demographic analysis and found that much that mirrors other kinds of studies and literature, that there was an overrepresentation of male, racialized, and lower income students in special education classes. Notably, students identified as gifted were disproportionately white and East Asian, had higher incomes, were also male. And that there were a few differences across placements for gifted students in terms of gender and outcome, but there were, interestingly, racial differences did emerge. Neither outcome or demographic finding are particularly unique and mirror much of the international and empirical literature on all of these points. So that's kind of the overview of the data analysis that we've completed and have shared with the consultation group. The consultation group is a key part of the special education review. We have assembled and we have met twice, once for introductions, an overview of the guiding principles and the tasks ahead. And the second time we met, which was just last week, we introduced the previously discussed data analysis and responded to questions. And just note that members of the working group have ongoing access to the data analysis, and that we'll be working together to determine how and when best to share these outcomes publicly. So at our last meeting, we also shared broad themes for a survey that we hope can capture the experiences of families, students, and staff who support students in classrooms. And we've invited members of the consultation group to take these themes and share them with their networks and collect feedback that will inform the forthcoming survey tools. So ideas for broad themes, just so everyone knows and can think about it and share with both Nora and Latoya. In particular for students and families, they may include things like looking at the learning environments, looking at families and students' experience of academic support, engagement, belonging, safety, expectations and satisfaction with what's happening in schools. As well as for staff, broad things could also include the effectiveness of the IEP, the role of placement or interventions in practice, implementing support, educator perceptions on students' engagement and safety, expectations around student support. So finally, I'm wrapping up at this stage. We continue to do 3 courses. We are working on the analysis for students with developmental disabilities that will be part of this kind of initial system piece. And we will strategize with the consultation group around reporting on system data, and we will collaborate with this consultation group around the development of survey tools as a first step. And then once we have the survey data, we'll be working with the group to establish tools for the focus groups, which will be forthcoming. And I think I went rather quickly, but that is it from me.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. By the way, Leanne, can you let me into the Zoom? That'd be great. Nora, you and Latoya we're only allowed to have 2 delegates on their advisory committee, and you and Latoya are they, and you were going to make a short response from your perspective on what's going on to update us.
Thank you.
Can you just tell everyone who you represent? Nora's a member of SEAC.
Yeah, and I represent Inclusion Action Ontario, which is kind of important actually, given what I'm about to say. So Jillian did a great job summarizing what we were walked through for an hour. I found it challenging as a member of the committee to see the data in that moment and then to generate the questions on demand that I would want to generate. And I also found it, and I'm going to be honest, I found it very difficult to take on multiple perspectives. So literally after I got off that meeting, I ended up having to send a subsequent email because all of a sudden, and just because we chat a lot, Leo and I, all of a sudden I could hear his perspective that is very different from mine. And I felt like I owed it to the committee to represent interests that actually don't align with my association's interest. But I felt it was only fair since I was asked to represent more than just my association. So I want to say I feel uncomfortable a little bit representing perspectives that I don't share. And I feel committed to this committee's totality and how we are stronger together. So I did feel uncomfortable about that a little bit. I have some questions that I guess will be answered by Nandy and Jillian later about how we're going to make a connection from what I perceive as not program, because this has been called a special education program review. It's really a placement
review with, from what I understand, 3 placements sort of being put together, all the regular class placements of withdrawal, resource, and indirect being broken into accommodated and modified. And then there's, because the ISPs are put together. So without students who are working on alternative programming being part of this particular review, for people who have students with specific exceptionalities and are looking for very specific data about their programs, I'm not sure how this review will address whatever questions they might have. So I've sent that question on. And then the other thing I felt uncomfortable a little bit with, and I'm just going to say, and I understand staff's concerns, so they're afraid. So Latoya and I have been asked to wait for approval for things to share with the whole committee. And I told staff in transparency, I'd be bringing this up. So I see their perspective about what happens with data when it's not contextualized. So I understand that. Having said that, I find it difficult to get all of your perspectives when you can't see it. So I still have those
Nora.
concerns, and I wanted to put those on the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now open it up to anyone from SEAC who wants to give feedback to the review, not to Nora and our folks, but to the review, since we've got them there. I'm going to just start with one very quick point from my perspective. I see that you're looking at constructing a survey for parents and families. In principle, I get it. But with the depth of information you want, I really question how useful that's going to be. It would be far, far, far better for this review to conduct town hall meetings with parents in the different corners of the city, like SEAC did last November in this room and online. Then it's not a matter of sitting and filling out a form that maybe you have no idea if anybody's going to read or what they meant or how they interpret what you say. You get to actually speak face to face or virtually with people. So I know there was discussion of some focus groups, but I will go further and quickly say, if you really want to survey their experiences, you got to talk to them in an environment that lets them really speak. That's my view. I'm going to ask if anyone
Thanks for
from
that, David.
SEAC, we've got till 25 after more or less. If you want to make any comments now, could you just indicate? Latoya will take a speakers list and we'll see how many we can fit in. And if we can't, then I'm going to have you feel free to write feedback to Leanne, which will get sent on to Jillian and to Latoya and Nora. But let's see who would like to speak now.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I've got 3, so can I do 2 minutes each? Leo, and then,
I'll try my best, David. Thanks.
okay,
So-
Leo, Jean-Paul, and then Richard.
Dr. Parek and
Sit
Steph,
there.
thanks for presenting. I think it's very, very concerning that you evaluate outcomes mainly based on academic measures and graduation rates. At a first glance, it might seem like a reasonable metric to evaluate ISPs. After all, graduation is a milestone that symbolizes academic achievement and successful transition to adulthood. But if you delve deeper, you will see that the approach is not only flawed, it is fundamentally ableist. Neurodiversity advocates and academics call this out all the time, and I think it's about time we start listening to autistic academics. We must recognize the broader context in which these metrics are rooted. In his book, Empire of Normality, Neurodiversity and Capitalism, Robert Chapman, a neurodiversity academic with an interest in emancipatory politics and social theory, disability, and mental health, explained how the capitalist framework reduces individuals to productivity, judging their worth based on their ability to generate profit and efficiency. There are many other autistic academics I can reference. In my understanding and the understanding of so many parents we represent at Autism Ontario, this narrow view that you're using of worth is inherently ableist, as it excludes and marginalizes those who do not fit into the normative conception of productivity, to which this traditional school system is closely tied. Consider for a moment the students who are placed in the ISP. They are some of our kids with the greatest needs, children with disabilities, whose daily struggles and triumphs are far removed from your narrow confines of graduation statistics. Their parents are at peace with their reality. They don't measure their kids' success by a diploma or a silly cap and gown. Their metrics are far more profound, far more humane. The OCDSB did a similar review, and the newspaper Ottawa Citizen wrote an article. In it, they interview a mom who says, "My son will never graduate from high school. We just want him to be happy." We speak to so many more parents like that at Autism Ontario. If you ask them what success looks like, you'll hear them saying things like, "Is my kid going to school? Is my kid happy?" Or even, "Is my kid alive?" Right? These are not questions born out of complacency or having a low bar. They're the questions of parents with lived experience who very realistically understand that their children need support for their entire lives, and they're at peace with that. They are questions of parents who know that a child's worth is not measured by standardized tests or graduation ceremonies or the data that you're analyzing, but by their well-being, their joy, and their participation in a community that values them as they are. This metric, this narrow focus on academics is ableist. It reduces our kids to data points, ignoring their unique needs and experiences. It devalues the incredible efforts made by families and educators to ensure that every kid, regardless of ability, has a place in our school. It perpetuates a system that prioritizes number over people, values uniformity over diversity, and productivity over humanity. You must challenge this narrative. We must reject the notion that graduation rates are the sole indicator of success for ISPs. True success in ISPs is measured by participation, by happiness, by the simple yet profound act of going to school and being part of a community. The TDSB has to adopt a more comprehensive and humane approach to evaluating outcomes in ISPs, just like the trustees at the OCDSB did when they rejected the review, which was flawed. Let us consider metrics that truly reflect the diverse needs and experiences of our students. Attendance and engagement. Is the child attending school regularly and actively participating? Well-being and happiness. Is the child happy, content, and emotionally supported? Individual growth. Is the kid making progress based on their unique abilities and growths?
Okay, Leo, can you just wrap up in the next 30 seconds? Would you
I'll
be
wrap up.
kind?
Thanks, David. Anyway, these are the metrics that matters for our kids with high needs.
And
These are the metrics that reflect our commitment to every child's right to an education, to happiness, and to a life of dignity and respect. Ask the parents what they consider respect. I know that we do at Autism Ontario. Thank you.
All right, and for the benefit of Jillian, we're not asking the people conducting the review to answer here because we have limited time, and it's because we're not all on this advisory committee. This is our rare chance to get something to say, and I want to get as many people in as possible. Jean-Paul, go ahead. Pardon me, go ahead. You're next up, and then Richard.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Julian, for sharing the initial findings with us. I think that is one thing that I don't know if I miss it. What can you please tell us what is how many years of data that you kind of analyze to find out all of this? How many school years? And I'm sure that by depending on the way that you analyze the data, you probably kind of find some information that will, provide us with some knowledge about some of the children that, Leo just described here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask if Richard can speak, and then if we have time left, I'll ask Jillian if she can respond, and if not, maybe she can get an answer to Leanne to be shared with Jean-Paul and the rest of the committee. Thanks, Jean-Paul, for the question. Richard?
Thank you, David, and everyone. In terms of the survey and the community I represent, which is the Down Syndrome Association of Toronto, noting that Down syndrome is not an exceptionality, but is actually a genetic condition, I'm curious to know how in your survey students with Down syndrome are captured in terms of their placement that is not necessarily aligned with the definition of their psychological assessment, but instead based on other factors such as parent preference, ability for those students to learn more in other settings, and just kind of curious how that works. And also for students that are like, say, have a mild intellectual disability, but maybe in a regular classroom placement. I know it's happened in the past. I don't know if it's happening now. So I'm just wondering how all of that is captured, especially for the Down syndrome community, because it's not an exceptionality and there's multiple exceptionalities throughout that community. So that's a question I have for the survey committee. Thank you.
Okay, and again, I'm going to ask because we're about to be out of time, if we can get an answer for Richard as a follow-up. The only other thing I'm going to say, which really builds on both of all of what Richard and Jean-Paul and Leo said, which is that the metric of graduating, I don't know why I'm echoing. The metric of graduating is disproportionately biased against kids who have particular disabilities which aren't measured for graduation. A blind child, vital to learn at school, is how to use a white cane and get around. You don't pass a test on that, but you need to learn it, and it's part of what TDSB trains. If you don't measure it, it's inherently unfair in measuring success and outcomes. And any discussion about engagement and accomplishment is a, if you will, photon-dependent bias. I'm sure from the deaf and hard of hearing perspective, you could come up with analogous ones, and from other disabilities as well. So I thank Jillian and the team for their presentation. I hope we can get those responses at a time that's convenient with you. And I thank you for your the feedback from members here, and let's keep it coming. With respect to our next agenda item, I want to invite, we have a delegation here. We have one presenter and a very eager group of folks, I shouldn't say crowd, group of parents, students, families who've come to watch. So Ronan, if you could come up front. And just so everyone knows, our usual practice, especially with a jam meeting, is you get 5 minutes more or less, and I understand you're going to get in maybe a little over 5, but not by much.
Not by much.
You will speak. We won't have a chance to ask questions, but we will not forget what you're saying, and it'll be informing where we go from here. So go ahead. Please tell us who you are and what you got to say.
Thank you, David. My name is Ronan Clayman. I'm on the parent council at Lucy McCormick Secondary School. My daughter Evie goes to the school. She just left because she couldn't wait any longer. Good evening, SEAC members and TDSB leadership. My name is Ronan Clayman. I'm the parent and child of Lucy McCormick. I'm here on behalf of families from Lucy and other congregated schools. Many of us are here tonight, and thank you all for coming, with our children, because we are fighting for their safety, their dignity, and their legal rights. Ontario's Education Act, Regulation 298, Section 31F is crystal clear. In a class for aphasia or autistic pupils, or for pupils with multiple handicaps to whom no one handicap is dominant, the maximum enrollment is 6 pupils. This regulation was created to protect the most vulnerable children in the education system, children with multiple complex needs. But the TDSB has eliminated this protection by refusing to recognize multiple exceptionalities as a valid classification, and by not creating a class type that aligns with this 31F provision. Instead, these students are being misclassified under other categories, often developmental disability, where the class cap is 10. This technical workaround is being used to justify increasing class sizes and reduction in support. The TDSB may believe that 10 is a manageable class size for students with profound needs, but we're here to tell you it's not. By exploiting loopholes in the Education Act to serve budgetary goals, the TDSB has lost sight of its moral and legal duty to protect the most vulnerable, highest need students in our province. They hide behind their ability to maneuver within the Act in order to justify class sizes that are unsafe and inappropriate for our kids. My daughter, Evie, is diagnosed with Phelan-McDermott syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, severe intellectual disability, obsessive compulsive disorder, PICA, nonverbal communication. Her IPRC lists only one exceptionality, ASD. This is not an oversight. This is standard practice across congregated schools. Evie's needs are not rare or extreme at Lucy or Beverly. Every child there meets the criteria under 31F, but the TDSB has intentionally avoided using this category, eliminating the legal protections these children are owed. Have any TDSB executives stopped to ask educators at these schools what it would look like to have 10 of our children in a classroom with one teacher? Have they stopped to actually imagine this scenario? These are not students quietly seated at desks. They are nonverbal, in diapers, medically fragile, often pacing around the class trying to self-regulate. Many require toileting every 30 to 60 minutes, suctioning or G-tube feeding. Just assisting with toileting alone could take a staff member out of the classroom for 5 to 10 minutes. Multiplied across 10 students, that's the entire day gone to basic care without taking into account the other medical and emotional regulation needs of our kids. This leaves classrooms overwhelmed before learning can even begin. And yet the TDSB is planning to increase these class sizes to 10 by placing students under misaligned categories that do not reflect their actual needs. We understand the TDSB is underfunded and may believe this classification system is a budgetary necessity. They may already have their minds set on a goal of reducing funding for special needs classes, as their recent tone deaf survey suggested is a possibility. But we are here to say, clearly, their assumptions are false and flawed. These are not theoretical concerns. They are urgent calls from those who live the reality every day, and the TDSB needs to listen. What's happening is unsustainable, is unacceptable, and is unsafe. If they're going to make decisions about class sizes for children like ours, they need to walk a mile in the shoes of the teachers who support them every day. TDSB executives should be required to spend a full day at Lucy or Beverly, not a 45-minute walk through glad handing, a full day. Only then will they understand why parents and educators are not just raising alarms. They are pleading to not increase class sizes because they know it puts students and teachers at risk. Section 31F wasn't written as a suggestion. It was written to protect children exactly like ours. In just 1 week, we've laid the foundation for a united, coordinated movement across all congregated school parent councils. We are organized, committed, and we're not going anywhere. We will not rest until the TDSB corrects its course and creates a class type in line with Section 31F to ensure that the classrooms that care for the most vulnerable kids with the most complex needs in the system are capped at 6 students, as the Act intended. In under 1 week, over 380 families and educators from congregated sites have signed a petition demanding compliance with Regulation 31F. Their concerns are clear: safety, dignity, and the right to an equitable education. Our coalition is growing, and many families are here tonight to show the human face of this issue. We ask SEAC to recommend the reinstatement of a class type aligned with Regulation 298, Section 31F, to ensure that IPRCs accurately list all diagnosed exceptionalities, to require compliance with a 6-student cap where 31F applies, to review how exceptionalities are recorded and used in placement decisions, and urge the ministry to reject any future plan that does not include 31F provisions. Lastly, to require the TDSB special education executives to spend a full day in a classroom at Lucy or Beverly. This is not just a legal issue, this is a moral one. These children cannot advocate for themselves. It's up to us. The TDSB has a choice: defend a technical loophole or defend the rights of its most vulnerable students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
I'd like at this time request that my written remarks be received as well.
Yes, we'd like I propose that his remarks be received as form part of the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Jessica, all in favor? Are there any opposed? If not, they will form part of the minutes, and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And for all watching, we don't just listen, we act. I think the first follow-up, we won't have time to debate or discuss this, but the first follow-up is that we would like to ask staff if we can get some sort of response, perhaps at the June meeting, on the issues that were raised and the recommendations, because that can assist us in deciding where to go next. And to all of you, please keep watching our meetings. And please, the only other thing I want to say is we have the right to receive delegations. Last fall, we dedicated a whole meeting. We called it a town hall, but we don't need to call it a town hall. Anybody here, anybody watching, if you would like to make a delegation on a topic relevant to students with disabilities or special education needs, please use the form online or just email us and apply. And we are open to hearing from individuals and community groups regarding families of students at our schools. Thank you very much. Let me now make an extremely brief chair's report because I want to move to our next agenda item. And by the way, those attending are more than welcome to either stay if you like, or not stay if you'd prefer, but you're welcome. You're totally welcome here. Our meetings are always open. So as for my chair's report, it's in writing. I don't have anything to add now other than an open invitation for community groups and individuals to seek to make delegations about the barriers that students face, students with disabilities and special education needs, and what you would recommend the TDSB should do. And we'd love to review your request and include as many as we can. Could I ask if my report, my chair's report, can be received? Do I need a second? Just in case anybody want to second my request? Jessica, any opposed or all in favor? We're good? All right, we're received.
Excuse me, David.
Sure.
I saw that Richard had his hand up. He wanted to ask a question to the delegates.
Oh, we don't, by practice, there can be exceptions, but because of time, we're not going to have an opportunity for question for the delegates here. But if you email one to Leanne, she will forward it to Ronan and make sure there's a chance to get an answer. And we can share the answer with all of us.
Okay, I understand that, but I think this is because we're moving towards the budget. And one other issue that I actually wanted to ask, because I couldn't find this anywhere, that also relates to the subject of the delegation, is the multiple exceptionalities designation that has been phased out.
Okay, again, what I'm going to ask you to do, because we've got huge things, is just email the question to Leanne, copy me. She will get back to you with an answer from staff, and we can talk about where we move on this. I'm not in any way minimizing the importance of it. I'm maximizing what I got to get through and making sure people get a chance to speak on them. So the next,
David, could I ask?
Yes.
That's not a question, actually. I just want to, or maybe this question. Can we get this as a topic on the next meeting? Because very
that's something
commonly,
I'm certainly going to look to. But first, I'm eager to get back from staff.
I'm just concerned it's been glossed over. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, listen, it's hugely important, and I get it. Okay, the next topic is the special education, or pardon me, the budget survey that was launched last month. Let me give a very quick summary and invite input, but focus on what do we do about it. Last month, the TDSB on email sent out a survey to all parents, basically, if I can paraphrase, probably imprecisely, saying that they're over budget, they're looking at areas they can cut, and they sought parents' input on different areas. Special education was listed there. SEAC members were extremely and understandably and justifiably very upset. This should not be a subject that is subject to some kind of public opinion survey. Moreover, the duty to accommodate students with disabilities is enshrined in the Constitution and the Human Rights Code, not subject to a survey. It is risky that this could create backlash where some parents might think that support for students with special education or disabilities, special education needs or disabilities, are somehow could be traded off for music or pools or something else. And the risk of bullying, of parents feeling vulnerable, students feeling vulnerable, whether or not it materialized, the risk of it was self-evident and transparently obvious. And a school board committed to anti-ableism, anti-oppression, and human rights should not be doing anything that could risk creating this problem. but it also, from feedback our members have received, has engendered real fear on the part of some parents that the supports for their children in the school board may be in jeopardy. And especially when there's a concern that one has to too often battle for those supports, this could just make them feel even more vulnerable. For all of those reasons, what I did in an attempt to capture what I believe to be the summary of your views. By the way, a number of you made excellent delegations to the Budget Committee, and thank you for doing that. I was out of the country and wasn't following this. This was a genuine expression of where SEAC members' hearts, minds, worries, and stomachs are in terms of sense of concern. So what do we do about it? I'm happy if you wish to make comments on why you object to it, but I hope why you object to what TDSB did. But I want to focus our time, if we can, as much as possible on what we do. I am proposing a motion. I'm open, if people like it, to you supporting it. If you don't like it, rejecting it, or if you want to add or amend it, to do so. I haven't heard back with any suggested changes, but I know Nora has one in mind, and I totally want her and anyone to feel free to add. And may the will of SEAC be expressed if we choose to. In substance, I summarized in the whereases the list of reasons people were upset. I also then recommended two things. It is us recommending to the board that number one, there be no cuts to special education. And that number two, that the board not raise the possibility, or pardon me, that number two is that the board communicate to parents that there will be no cuts to special education. It is my hope that through this motion, if it passes and if the board approves it, that the result will be at least to mitigate the consequences of that survey. Open to your input. Anybody who wants to, has anything to say or propose? I know, Nora, you wanted to propose an amendment. So, and can I have a seconder for the motion just so it's on the table? Leo's seconding. Nora, you wanted to propose an amendment. And we have a speaker.
Thanks, David. And I think there'd be people online that will want to say something since the emails were quite fast and furious. I think there's no acknowledgement about the harm. So the part that I found very emotional when I delegated was there's no acknowledgement that the anxiety that families are put through, the targeting many of the students face when they're on the schoolyard about things. So for example, I've seen like, this is a macro version of what I've seen happen where somebody plans a trip, a student can't attend because they use a chair or the trip's inaccessible. And then somebody announces, well, we can't go anymore because there's a student who can't go. So the whole class looks to that student like, oh, we would have been somewhere, but because of you, we're not going. So I feel like this is a systemic level of, we could have pools, but we have to pay for special ed. We could have whatever, but we have to pay for special ed. And giving the public the impression that they have the right to chime in about human rights makes me feel, as an advocate and a mom of people, that this is charity and not rights. That we're talking about how much do kids, how much can we afford? Well, that's it for a day. So, I feel a little bit like I'm the matchstick girl looking at the food through the window. I feel like there's a fundamental lack of acknowledgement that people were hurt and harmed, and that disability is a population that faces a lot of oppression and stigma, that they face it on a personal level on schoolyards. We face it as an institutional level as people try and force us into programs and placements, not of our choosing, that people seem to lack or draw lines and boundaries around the supports that we're able to access and not necessarily ever entitled to. So I think I'm pretty wounded. And I'm offended that there's not an apology that's going to be public. And I don't mean in this room, and I don't mean by the people sitting over there. I mean, institutional level. I'm talking about, I don't want to go
Hey,
digging into.
Nora, I'm going to ask if you could just
And who
move
did
to
this?
the amendment you want to make, just because I got 4 other people who want to speak and I want to make sure we
I
give them a
like
chance.
where the survey was to have an apology. That this caused harm and we're sorry that it caused harm to those families and that those aren't negotiable rights.
So you're proposing an amendment that would add number 3, the TDSB should apologize for the survey. And or for the inclusion of special education in the survey. Is that wording acceptable?
Yes.
All right. I'm prepared to ask, proper formal procedure is to first vote on the amendment, which I have no objection to, and then vote on the actual motion. But first, let's get the other speakers speaking. And it's Bronwyn, Richard, and Leo.
Yeah. And Abby.
Thank you.
And Anna and Isabella. I'm going to be a little bit tougher on this. And can you do
I'll
within
be
a minute,
quick.
each of
I
you?
will be
Can you-
quick. I will
Really
be.
good. And
I promise it's just, we need an apology. I am absolutely appalled that we have not seen Ryan Bird do a public media apology. It is absolutely awful. I do not accept this. And people have come to me at our school who know how strongly this has rocked me and many other parents and apologized. People are expecting your apology who do not even have children who are in the special education at the TASB. It is absolutely unacceptable. And I want to see it happen because you keep disappearing. We've sent you emails and you are ignoring us. It is still offensive that no one at TDSB level has responded to any of our emails specifically on this issue. So please take action. This is absolutely unacceptable.
all right, thank you. And just to be clear, in fairness, that the request is for TDSB to make an apology. It's not.
TDSB,
It's
Ryan
not
Bird on
it's
behalf.
not targeted at any individual or department or anything. It's just corporately. All right, Richard.
Thank you, David. So 3 points, and following up on Nora's no acknowledgement of the harm and Bronwyn's request for that letter. I have outstanding in my community people that have asked for guidance on this. I cannot speak for the TDSB. I'm not that authority. So we do need the TDSB to write a letter that we can all share with the communities that we represent and the broader school system. I would also like to ask if the board is willing to release to us the raw data collected so we can better understand the mindset of the respondents, how they responded to this question, or is it necessary for us to go through request under Freedom of Information to get this data so we know what's going on there? And to your item, David, on be no cuts to special education and board commits to no cuts to special education, what does no cuts mean? Are we talking about no cuts to dollars, no cuts to staffing, increase in dollars to cover the staffing, hours given to a student? I think we need to make it very clear what no cuts means because it's such a broad term. They can just say no cuts to education, and just because they don't change something, look, there was no cuts, but I don't think that's valid. Thank you.
All right, Richard, thank you. The third speaker is
Leo, Isabella, then.
Leo, Isabella, and then Anna. Go ahead, Leo.
Primarily, I want to
Do it
thank
in
all
a
the,
minute, bud?
sorry,
Can you do it in a minute?
I can.
Good.
Primarily, thank you to all the trustees I spoke to about this after I almost had a heart attack when the survey landed in my email. Those trustees are responsible for bringing down this illegal and immoral survey, so thank you. I want to be absolutely clear. Special education is not optional. It is not discretionary. It is a legal right. Placing it on a list of possible reductions alongside programs like adult education is not only legally indefensible, it's also morally indefensible. This was not a communications oversight. It was a violation of trust that sent a message to the community that the supports our children rely on are negotiable. This is ableism in action. It is very unfortunate that this is the second time I'm speaking about ableism today. It almost feels like it's entrenched and systemic, don't you think? Anyway, this violates the Education Act, the Ontario Human Rights Code, the Supreme Courts of Canada ruling, and more. Yes, the survey was eventually removed after intense pressure from SEAC members, caregivers, and advocates. Thank you. But the damage was done. Parents were made to feel that their rights were up for public vote. Children themselves were made to feel like they cost too much to belong. And what's worse, we have not yet received a public apology. There has been no accountability. There has been no meaningful recognition of the harm caused. Just a little note on the website where their survey was that says the survey has been removed because the trustees asked us to. Let me be very clear, there have to be consequences, not to punish people, but to ensure that the systems remember what they forgot, that students with disabilities are not less, and that their education is not negotiable. We strongly support the motion and Nora's request to include an acknowledgement and apology from the TDSB. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Isabella,
Um,
can you
First
do it?
of all,
Can you do it in a minute?
yes, I can do
Great,
it in
thank
a
you.
minute, but I can tell you one thing that that whether we put in our motion that the TDSB does not put further cuts to special education, this is not going to help students who have special developmental and multiple exceptionalities, because right now those classes can have up to 10 students. So by that, by virtue of not acknowledging multiple exceptionalities and denying that, they are, they can say they're not doing any cuts, but they can add extra students. I don't think that the full implication what the delegation did today is fully understood, because this was the same question that I asked 2 months ago, if any of the special education schools, the congregated schools, will have their money cut. And all of us were told that they wouldn't be. And why they wouldn't be? Because they can have 10 students, because there is no provision for students with multiple exceptionalities. And that's why what I think we should do is make sure that the multiple exceptionality, which is recognized and it's supposed to be included in the special education plan, is actually acknowledged. Without that, they will cut. For us, for that community, they can have 10 students. So by virtue of that, I'm sorry, it is a cut to that population. It's very, it
Okay,
poses risk.
Isabella, good point, and I'm getting a subtle hint that this better be on the June agenda or I'm in serious trouble.
I
So
think so.
you can expect we're coming back to it,
Thank you.
okay? And if I don't come back to it, you are duly authorized to let me have it in a verbal sense, okay?
Okay.
Like seriously, we're gonna get back to it.
Thank you.
And you make a good point. Anna.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make a few quick points here. First of all, we were concerned not only about the special education item on the survey, but the lack of understanding about the intersectionality of all these services and how they help children with disabilities. For example, they had school safety on the survey. They had school-based safety monitors, lunchroom supervisors. All these services are needed for children with epilepsy to be safe in the classroom and in the school environment as a whole. So I think that speaks to a larger issue in terms of TDSB not recognizing how all these factors intersect together to create a safe learning environment for kids with disabilities. And I was hoping we could speak to that a little bit, maybe with them in terms of needing to review their system or their policy when they come up with these surveys and the purpose of them. I was told during the delegation that these extra items were not actually on the budget list to be addressed. However, that does not make it right that they were there, and does not acknowledge the harm that it did to parents and students who had to see that there. And I'd also just extend that it would be nice to have a response about the transparency on what the barriers are between SEAC and the school board to work on budgetary matters and surveys such as the one that that went out, because clearly there was no collaboration there. Thank you.
Okay, before we go, thank you very much for everybody, and thank you for indulging my need to deal with the timekeeping role of being chair. I'm just going to ask staff. I do not want to put you on the spot, and I know this survey didn't come from the special education branch, and I would rather us proceed to a vote on it, but say if staff want to have anyone speak to SEAC in June or at another time about this, who was responsible for it, you're totally open to do that. But I don't want staff, because you happen to be the ones here, to have to be left holding the can for a decision that, let's just say, had to by definition come from somewhere else. And I'm not asking you to comment on it. So, but on the other hand, I don't want to have this whole discussion and not give you a chance if you want to speak to anything. If you do, I'm happy to give you the chance before we vote. And if not, we can address it as you feel constructively in the next SEAC meeting.
Thank you for the opportunity, David, and very much appreciate the outpouring of emotion from SEAC members both this evening and at the delegations. I'm not sure if you heard the Director Latouche speak to the survey in response to questions. So maybe I'll paraphrase the Director. The phrase that comes to my mind is intent and impact, right? The intention was to speak transparently to the TDSB community about the very real challenge about the deficit. So intentionally use the words reductions and included areas of the budget that far exceeded funding levels in what is enveloped. And of course, we know that special education, I think we're at $38 million, and we all share the same sentiment about that funding and the absolute importance of being outside of the envelope. The unintended impact was the hurt and the anxiety. You've heard me reinforce that the staffing levels that are in our system right now are committed for next year. In the reports that have gone before the board, we have not, and I've reinforced this with you, and I'll say it again, staff are not putting options forward to reduce investment in students with special education needs. So I say that again. But I completely understand the motion, Chair Lepofsky and SEAC members, and know that your heartfelt sentiment, if it is passed and presented to the Board of Trustees, will be heard. The Director in his remarks was listening very intently to trustees who reinforced their, I'll use the word regret and missed opportunities. As you are indicating about SEAC's involvement and their involvement, they actually have a committee, a communication committee that for reasons not explained, were not part of the review of the survey. And the Director indicated that because of the sentiments that were being expressed, not only at the boardroom table, but also from the many parents, including yourselves and the delegates, remove the survey to stop the hurt and the harm. To Richard's question, I don't have the numbers, Richard, but I'm sure that will be public through time. But what I can tell you is that special education is listed as the least preferred area for reductions. And that was really the only option, right, for participants in the survey. But it's, Nora said she's not hoping for an apology from members in this room. What I will say is that I very much, I do apologize for the unintended impact. And going forward, I will bring the experience of this year and the hurt that's been expressed to any future surveys that are going. They are an annual, I don't want to say obligation, it's an opportunity to engage with our parents. And all of your voices will be echoed by myself, by Nandi, by the full special education team, so that this this is not repeated in the future. So please know that we're listening deeply. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. With this, and in order to move things to, I'm going to ask first, we have a motion to amend to add the request for an apology. Could we have a vote on that, please? All in favor? Online, please raise your hands. In person, please raise your hands if you're able. Online, are we, did we?
I'm just counting.
Okay.
So I have 12 in favor, which is
Including Latoya.
including the 20. So
Do we need more?
3 members, 12 is what we need.
Yep, you've got 12?
Yes.
Okay, it passes. Now, could we have a vote on the motion itself? All in favor, please?
Um,
I'm going to gamble that people who want the apology or vote for the rest of it. Yeah,
So I just simply added
yep,
the statement that TDSB should apologize for the inclusion of special education in the survey. Is
Yes.
that the amendment?
yes,
Just so that people know what they're doing.
yep.
Yes, we're good.
All right, it passes. I am also going to ask, I will present this to trustees at my first available opportunity. And I will also ask the staff to connect me with the investigator that the province has passed, because if they're going to consider what cuts need to be made, I'm going to convey your wishes to them too. All right, let us now proceed to the next agenda, and thank you. And this is emotional for very good reasons. A no less emotional topic is the whole area of exclusion of students with disabilities or special education needs from school, sometimes called refusals to admit. For the benefit of people either here or online who are not up to speed, the Education Act gives principals a power to refuse to admit someone to school who they, in their opinion, would be detrimental to the physical or mental well-being of students at school. We have been raising at SEAC since February of 2018 concerns about TDSB, seeking efforts by TDSB to rein in this practice. And we've had reports from staff of their desire and efforts to do so. And as well, in 2019, largely as a result of our efforts, TDSB passed a policy and a procedure governing how these are supposed to take place. In January, we had a report from the executive superintendent, or if that's the correct title, responsible in this area, Jim Spiropoulos, where we asked for an update. He presented, we raised some ideas about how to make things better. He came back in March. We asked him if he could speak to those ideas. He spoke further. In a nutshell, I'm going to summarize the 5 ideas. And also he had said at the time, and these are all available online, the video's archived, but in a nutshell, he had commented at the time that they aren't in his department's authority to comment. We had been asked by staff to say, what more can the board do in this area? So we had expressed 5 ideas. 1, there should be a unique attendance code for anyone, any student who's not in school because they have a refusal to admit, formal, informal, whatever you want to call it. Number 2, and we've been told by staff that there is one, the provincial one is not unique. It's governed by multiple different reasons for being away from school. We want a unique one so the board can immediately punch up and know who's not in school for this reason. The second, we don't know what the school board one is. We'll be eager to find out. Second, we said it would be useful for the board to publicly post and communicate with parents that every child has the right to be in school. Because we could have parents whose child has been told not to come to school who don't realize they have a right to be there. Third, it would be helpful if there was a phone number publicly provided where if a parent has their child isn't in school and they'd like them to be in school, that they can call. And so senior folks who are concerned to rein this in, commendably, can take action. Fourth, we raised the idea that there's a survey sent around to all principals every month, and they fill out on how many students in their school that month are on a reduced school day. How about adding a line to that form, simply saying how many are not in school at all during the month or part of the month or any day of the month, because they were told they can't be in school by the school. Did I forget one? Rob will tell me if I forgot one. Anyway, and we're eager to know because we believe these steps and the steps we raise could be dealt with. So what are we going to do today? I've invited two guests, Rob and Sean, if you could come up front. I'm going to introduce you. They're going to make short presentations, and then I'm going to open it to questions by anyone. And I'm inviting staff to also feel free to comment on those options if they are prepared to. So first we have Sean. You're both here? Yep. Let me just introduce our two guests who are wonderful people. One is a returning guest and one it's first time. Sean Pegg is a policy analyst with Community Living Ontario. Rob Latanzio is the executive director of the Arch Disability Law Center, a legal clinic that advises and represents people with disabilities. Rob is the one who brought this issue to us in February 2018, and we're forever indebted. Sean has led a project that reported last month. They conducted a provincial survey to ascertain how often refusals to admit or exclusions take place. They made it public. You have a copy of it in your reading materials. It is or will be on our website, and you can tell us where they can find it on yours. And so, Sean, I'm asking you in about 5 minutes, can you just summarize what you found and what you recommended? And I want to note, this is a provincial survey. It is not specifically addressing the Toronto District School Board alone. Sean, take it away.
Okay, thanks, David. And I am going to talk about exclusion, but I'm not only going to talk about exclusion, I'll talk about a couple of other connected things as well.
Sure.
So these are the results of a study we did with Jess Whitley at the University of Ottawa in the summer of 2023. We had information from 541 parents and caregivers of students with all types of disabilities. And among those more than 500 parents and caregivers, 29% reported that their child had been involuntarily secluded while in school. In other words, placed in a separate space away from their peers, often behind locked or blocked doors. 14% reported that their child had been physically restrained while in school, including being held down on the ground, held while standing, or held while being forced to walk. And 31% reported that their child had been sent home or told to stay home because the school was unable to meet their needs. And often children were experiencing all of these things. And this data is for the 2022-23 school year only. So this is just 12 months of data. We had 30 responses from caregivers of students in the TDSB. And among these responses, we did receive reports of exclusion, seclusion, and restraint. And certainly in my role at Community Living Ontario, I have been privy to situations of children in the TDSB who have experienced all of these things. But I'm not comfortable sharing stats just from the TDSB because of the small sample size. Our data mirrors that released by Autism Advocacy in Ontario in 2019, which is a very good study. And while neither of these studies should be considered statistically representative of what's happening across the province, what they do show is that these things are happening to students with disabilities right across Ontario. So just to look more specifically at these issues, in terms of restraint, 1 in 5 students who were restrained experienced this 10 times or more. The incidence of restraint actually increased with younger students. So 1 in 5 students aged 11 or under in the survey had been restrained, physically restrained. And 40% of caregivers reported they'd not been contacted by the school after instances of restraint. In terms of seclusion, just looking at that more specifically, nearly half of students who'd been secluded experienced this more than 10 times. 1 in 4 spent more than an hour in seclusion at a time. And students were more likely to be secluded if their family had a lower level of education, and again, if they were younger. Now, in terms of exclusions, we also, in addition to students being sent home or told to stay home or have it implied that they should stay home because of a lack of resources or a lack of support, we also saw significant self-exclusion and days off because of school-related stress, fear, and anxiety. For example, according to caregivers, a quarter of students rarely or never enjoy attending school. A quarter rarely or never feel valued by school staff. Nearly a third rarely or never feel accepted by their peers. And more than 1 in 5 are often or always excluded from academic and or extracurricular events or opportunities. So this lack of belonging and inclusion, according to my analysis of this, is leading to parents giving students a day off or students choosing not to go to school. Half of our sample met the criteria for chronic absenteeism, in other words, missing 10% or more of school days. But again, the most noted reason for missing time was school instruction to go home or to stay home because of a lack of supports or resources. How am I doing for time, David?
You're doing okay. Let's get moved to your recommendation.
So, parents told us over and over again that there's just not enough support in the classroom to meet the emotional and learning needs of all students. We understand that teachers are doing the best they can and other school staff are doing the best they can under difficult circumstances, but they are overwhelmed and under-resourced. Parents also told us that school staff often don't have the knowledge and training to meet the learning and emotional needs of many students with disabilities. And in terms of restraint and seclusion, I still find it a little incredible that there's no provincial regulation or policy that addresses restraint or seclusion of students with disabilities. So school boards are left to their own devices, and approaches varies across boards, across schools, and even across classrooms. And this is also generally true of exclusion. We know that practice varies across boards, and from principal to principal, I'm sure many of the folks in this room have experienced differences in treatment and approach when a principal changes or when they move from one school to another. Things can shift very drastically, either positively or negatively. In terms of recommendations, so these issues are obviously interconnected, and it's not going to be possible to address any of them in isolation. So Community Living Ontario is calling for more support in classrooms in a way that benefits all students, more training for staff that is built on a deep understanding of the needs of students with disabilities and the root causes of externalizing or challenging behaviors. We're calling for provincial guidance and policy on these issues. And in terms of reporting, we think it's necessary that schools be required to inform parents on the day when seclusion or restraint has taken place, that schools be required to report on the number of students who've been restrained and or involuntarily secluded, the length of each instance of restraint and or seclusion, and the number of instances per student. And in turn, school boards and the ministry should publish annual stats on the use of restraint and seclusion. And lastly, in cases where students are attending school for less than the full instructional day, we recommend that schools, school boards, and the ministry be required to report on the number of students attending for partial or modified days and the key reasons for those decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, folks, be ready to ask questions. And while the agenda item is exclusions, not restraints or seclusion rooms, if people have questions and we have time, I'm not, of course, going to rule those out. And there are topics that we need to be able to deal with in future meetings. Rob, you and I decided that it would be most efficient if we do this almost like a quick Q&A. And I know you watched the past parts of our January and March meetings when this topic was discussed. So I want to talk to you about a few things that came up there. One of the things we asked staff for numbers of how many exclusions there've been. And at an earlier meeting, a year and a half ago, I think, I may have it wrong, staff gave us those numbers. In January, Jim Spiropoulos said, they can't tell us because the numbers are so low that to disclose the total number would tend to reveal who the student is or are and violate their privacy. Now, a number of us sitting in this room found that argument difficult to understand. You took a look at it. Do you think that disclosing the total number of exclusions among a population of 250,000 students would tend to reveal to us who they are?
Well, in short, no, I don't think so, unless obviously there would be other information that would accompany it, which my understanding is there wouldn't be. So I guess I don't understand the concern.
In terms of the 4 options that we had asked the board to consider within budget, we know that more staff would always help, but we're dealing with what the board can do, not what the province should do. You and I have talked about the options of having the board clearly tell parents that every child has a right to be in school, having a phone number to call if there's a problem, so that staff can look into it, having this survey question, or pardon me, having this, the principals surveyed each month on how many students they have excluded, and having an attendance code that is unique so that if the school board wants to know how many school days / students were subject to exclusions, they could punch that up as long as the teachers are accurately recording it. I assume they will. Can you just talk to us from a legal perspective, or from the perspective of Arch, because you've dealt with parents of students who are subject to exclusions. Can you just comment on those ideas?
Certainly, I think if I can perhaps take a small step back, just reflecting on a lot of the discussion and the comments thus far. And there's an underlying theme here, right? It's not really a theme, it's a reality that the type of cases we get across the province, the sort of underlying thread is that students with disabilities aren't really being treated as rights holders, right? We talk about human rights and we talk about the right to education, but that means a lot of very particular concrete things, right? Things need to happen for those obligations that the board has to ensure that students can realize that right. And so if we think about certainly my cases, and I'll just say very quickly, I won't at any point be talking about any cases that we have at this board, but just generally the type of cases we get across the province. Having the conversation around refusal to admit kind of misses the boat in many ways, right? Refusal to admit is the final sort of symptom of this large problem, right? And even if we think about the definition itself, the provision itself, which Arch consistently will argue actually doesn't apply to students, but even the provision talks about an unsafe environment or an environment that creates risk, right, for students. Well, what are we talking about? Those environments are being created, if we agree that those environments are creating risk, by the fact that, at least again, in our cases, you can pinpoint where those supports, where those resources, where the attitudinal barriers that exist keep on creeping up that lead to certain decisions and lead to certain situations and lead ultimately to environments that then we're having these conversations about refusals to admit. But we're really needing to talk about what does it mean to think about students with disabilities as rights holders. So to get to your question, David, if we think about human rights law, for example, I mean, those are at a minimum, right, as a starting point, what you would need if you are aware that students are in one way or another being either told or implicitly hinted at, not going to school, right? So there's a duty to inquire, for example, within human rights law, where you have to understand the context, you have to understand the situation, and then you have a duty to collaborate and a duty to ultimately understand how to remedy that problem. So the type of solutions that SEAC has put forward, I think, again, I'll reiterate, I think a good start, an important start, or an important piece, rather, not a start. Certainly, the policy is perhaps we would categorize as a start, which is a way to have a bit of a path, but we always have to keep our minds open to the reality that these situations happen in very complex ways, very insidious ways. And we have to be open to other solutions. It really is, again, thinking about a bigger shift requiring some leadership to really change how we think about education service delivery for our students with disabilities.
Now, I'm going to do this fast because I know I want to get it open to staff to talk and then to my colleagues to ask questions or comment. You mentioned that you're concerned that the provision doesn't actually mandate this. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Certainly, we actually have a paper on our website. It's called Invented Power. I think we published it in 2017, 2018. It takes you through the legislative history.
This is of the provision that people read as giving principals the power to refuse to admit students.
That's right. And technically, you can argue it's not really a power, it's a duty, as it's written in the provision. So if you trace it back historically, you can then understand that provision was actually broken up into what is now Part 13 of the Education Act, which is the behavior and discipline part. And then you have this other part that is now devoid of language of pupils and devoid of the kind of procedural protections that students actually have in the Education Act, right? So when you think about Part 13, it's actually very different than 265-1M. And if we think about another really good example here, which is the trespass to property provision, which is the regulation 474, that regulation actually doesn't apply to students either. I think that was raised at the January meeting.
Metropolis last January said that's one of the bases said there were 3 ways to exclude a student from school: discipline, like suspension or expulsion, and the second was refusal to admit, and the third was trespass to property act. But what are you saying about the Trespass to Property Act?
So in 2007, the government actually agreed with us that provision, which is eerily similar to 265-1M, shouldn't apply to students. It should apply to people that are not students, who are on the grounds of the school and for one reason or another are creating some kind of risk for pupils. And so the government agreed with that and made an amendment to that regulation. So the regulation actually excludes students from the ability to actually remove them, right? That regulation is very particular.
All right. 2 other things. Jim Spiropoulos talked, and I had never heard this before, and I mentioned this, I think, at the meeting in January about one of the 2 meetings, about actually using the refusal to admit power on students who had been suspended and then the suspension ran out. You saw that? Can you comment on it?
So I just want to say a few words about that. I'm not sure I fully understood maybe the context. The way I understood that comment was that 265-1M was being used as a way to address any ongoing concerns that maybe followed the suspension, or the suspension took its course and 265-1M was, I think the words used was deeply interconnected or something to that effect. I don't want to misquote. so that again, given what I've just said about the role of 265-1M and the fact that it's arguable to this day whether it's actually even legal to use it
On students.
I'm deeply concerned if that is what's happening. Again, Part 13 is a very clear, very structured part, which is the way it is because we're talking about something so fundamental. When we think about students as rights holders, we are now removing those rights and removing them from school. But at the same time, because it deals with students, it has a whole bunch of different due process and other type of protections in that part, right? So when we think about Part 13, there's due process, there's a hearing, there are timelines, there's also rights to education, different type of education programs while students are away from school. There was a lot of thinking in how all of that plays out. Again, you go back to 265-1M, and it really doesn't give you anything that a trespass to order gives you, except a reference to an appeal, which almost every board in this province interprets that differently in one way or another. So the suspension and expulsion provisions, in my humble opinion here, it's a standalone section. That is the point. Once if you appeal the suspension and you're back in school, then you're back in school. You can't get another kick at it if that issue has been resolved in one way or another through Part 13.
So, okay. And the last thing is Jim mentioned his own concern about the number of students with disabilities that are actually subject to discipline suspensions. Can you give your thoughts on
that? Sure. Can I just make one other comment just really quickly? Sure. There was another comment that was made, which was that some principals feel compelled to use 265-1M because it's in the Education Act. Again, I just want to clarify that point. And I'll just go back to our experience at our clinic. It's actually the other way around, right? I mean, the stories we hear, again, I'm not speaking specifically about this board, but it's 265-1M is actually difficult to get from a principal, right? The idea is that it's usually, I think the language here is soft exclusion. I personally think that's a misnomer. I don't like using language like that. Ultimately, it's an exclusion. We used to actually call it coerced withdrawal, which is quite a little more, I guess, specific or direct. But the 265-1M is ultimately a way for parents to have some kind of record of what's really happening, right? That's really the sort of point here. And yes, I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers are low, but what we really need to be thinking about are all those students that are home and don't have any kind of formal. Okay. So to get to your question, sorry, David. So to get to your question, yes, I'm certainly concerned that your comment, I think, was around the comment about the disproportionate number of students who are identified that are suspended and expelled. Is that correct? So we're certainly concerned about that as well. Again, I think we always have to remember that, and of course, intersectionality plays a really big part of that as well. So we need to understand why that is happening. That is discriminatory. Again, if we're suspending and expelling students with disabilities for disability-related behavior, that's discriminatory. So if that is what's happening, we need to understand and address this because, again, it is discriminatory.
All right, thank you. I want to open it to questions from SEAC members for either our presenters and staff to Louise, Nandy, Debbie. We would like staff response on those 4 recommendations, but if you want to have more time or first hear the questions, I'm more than happy to push that to the next meeting. You tell me what you prefer. But let's just take a speakers list. Steve, I know you want to speak. You're going to go first. Do we have any other speakers who want to ask questions? Okay, Latoya says Latoya wants to. I don't think I can stop you. All right, Steve and Latoya, that's it. Okay, Steve, go.
Hey, thank you, David. Thank you so much for the information. Two things come to mind. One, that you've mentioned. One is that this is a self-perpetuating problem in that by not providing adequate, by not providing adequate funding for staffing for students with disabilities in terms of teachers, EAs, and SNAs, the boards, the province is creating these problems. They're creating the dangerous and difficult situations, which then allow them to say, well, these students are a danger, they should not be allowed in the school. The other comment I just want to make is that I have always felt, even when I first started on this committee, 15 years ago, refusal to admit should not be referred to students. It should be for parents, people that come into the schools and create an unsafe environment, but it should not be for students. So those are just the two things I wanted to say. This is going to require a huge provincial change. One, in removing refusal to admit from the Education Act, and two, to providing the adequate supports for these schools so that the students are not in dangerous situations as interpreted by staff, etc. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Latoya, and then Nora, you also want to speak.
Hi, thanks so much. And I really appreciate the conversation. It's probably one of the topics that's I've been having, just with some of the community members, and also it's a very personal one as well for myself. In terms of seclusions, have you given some thoughts on detentions and how those are used sometimes for students who are disabled, such as someone who is might have a learning disability and having a difficult time getting caught up, and then the use of just staying in for lunch, for example, to catch up on schoolwork, or just other things where I wouldn't say that the purpose might have been to to do it as a punishment, but for the child, it's being received as a punishment. And also in terms of restraints, because I appreciated that even coming up in this conversation as well. I know CAMH and hospitals has done a lot of work in terms of, number one, identify some of the reasons why their staff would even consider it, which one of them would have been fear, and addressing it from that that point, and then some research about reducing the restraints and stuff like that. So if there are any thoughts on how school boards can really start to acknowledge that it is something that is being done, where there are restraints that gets used on students, whether or not it was the intention sometimes is because they think it was helpful, but the impact was not, and how they can sort of learn from what the medical community has done to be able to improve how they handle behavior.
Yeah, I just want to distinguish seclusion from detention. I mean, with seclusion, I think it's very different. Like what we're seeing in many cases are bare rooms covered with exercise mats, often with locked or blocked doors. So this is not something that is reasonably considered. It is something that happens in the moment, and often restraint and seclusion are happening at the same time. students with disabilities, especially developmental disabilities, as has been said already, still face a lot of bias, stereotyping, and even fear amongst students, teachers, other school staff. And as long as that is happening, they're going to continue to be marginalized, misunderstood, and treated in ways that cause them extreme stress. And it's going to keep leading to these kinds of situations. So until we are in a place where teachers and other school staff are comfortable and truly understand the emotional needs of many students with disabilities, this is going to keep happening. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think this is a cultural issue. It's a training issue. It's a resource issue.
Okay, thank you. Nora, and then Isabella, you wanted to speak. So Nora, go
Sure.
for it.
I wanted to thank both of you for coming. Predominantly, I think our associations have tried to say we're experiencing increased incidents of this type of experience, educational experience or lack thereof. And so it's always good to hear it from outsiders who aren't us. And I think in particular for community living, I know NDP and political parties have tried to collect this data and the government has ignored it because it's politically affiliated. So I appreciate that an organization dedicated to the people who live with disabilities actually investigated that. I do think that what I would call is a time for courage from an institution like the TDSB. And you guys are courageous compared to most school boards. I'm going to put that out there. You guys put more out there than most school boards. So, but I think when we feel like we'll be on the hook, but to Steve's point, the resources aren't there. And trying to cover it up and make it look like it's all going on when it's not all going on and people are being left out of education or being confined is a worrying place. And I know everybody here believes that, and I know you guys believe that. It's about sort of how do you get that institutional courage to collect the data we need? How do we get people to actually commit to making sure that it's not shameful, like even destigmatizing the fact you're doing it? I know this sounds terrible because I can't believe I'm saying this out of my mouth, but somehow we have to have evidence that school boards are not meeting their duty to accommodate. It's not just you, it's the entire province. And the ministry is coming. Let them own it. Let them own it. But I think we need courage from somebody to help us prove how bad it is, because otherwise we have outside organizations who are having smattering of experiences trying to report this. Our associations are trying to report this. You have 230,000 students. You have 40,000 special education students. If not you, then who?
Isabella, and thank you, Nora.
I thank you so much for your presentation. This is very important. And I just wanted to speak to the idea of seclusion and restraint, I guess, from the perspective of students who actually need it as a way of calming down. And at the congregated sites, quite often students who become overstimulated, they need a way to be able to calm down. However, the spaces are outfitted properly and the staff over there actually knows how to facilitate that. My biggest fear is that this is happening at schools where students aren't really being properly supported. They're just left onto their own devices. So all I'm trying to say is that I just the existence of those secluded spaces for the students to calm down is important for some. But it has to be done in a way that actually will help that student by somebody who's properly trained to do that. So it shouldn't be completely removed, but it should be obviously it should be regulated. Anyways, sorry, I just wanted to mention that because it is an important way of controlling and self-regulation for some students. And I just wouldn't want it to completely disappear because it has a good place and really helps students. That's all. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I want, for the benefit of those for whom this is a new subject, to clarify one thing. And that is TDSB has probably one of the best, if not the best, policy on this in the province. There are several areas that I think it should be improved, but compared to other boards, it's way ahead. So the issue isn't that somehow centrally the board's decided, oh, this is all okay. The problem is that compliance with that policy, in effect, by individual principals, is voluntary because they can report it as they are supposed to according to the policy or not, and there's nothing being in place to provide for that. And that's where these ideas come from. And I want to modify one in light of Rob's presentation. I said the board should publicly state that every child has a right to be in school. It should also publicly state that every student with a disability has a right to be accommodated up to the point of undue hardship. Because a lot of parents, a lot of students may well not know that. I don't know how many staff know that. Our senior staff here abundantly know, respect, and agree with that they have this obligation. But there's a lot of people who don't. And if you're told to keep your kid home because we don't have support, in a world where you don't think your child has a right to be in school and has a right to be accommodated, you as a parent are far less likely to take any steps. The phone number is to give them a place to call, which can be a safe place where they don't worry that they're somehow antagonizing a principal who they've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But at least it gives the center, meaning senior staff here, a chance to know, and if possible, where they can, to follow up, because they've heard from us that the numbers are higher than what they've been told. And when they come to us with the numbers that they've been told, senior staff, they're genuinely telling us, I believe, what they've been told. So there's this gap between what's reported and what's potentially really going on. But there's another reason for my modification about why it would be important to include a very clear statement on the website in communication with parents about the duty to accommodate, which is that there's actually a very inaccurate statement of it on the special education part of the website. If you go to the page, and I believe it's the part discussing the guide to SEPRCs for incoming students into the board, if memory serves, and after the meeting I can look up the link, it refers to the board having a duty to accommodate students with complex medical disabilities. And we've heard some staff use that term. I don't think anybody here, any of the staff here have, but previously have. Now, the Human Rights Code doesn't say that. The Charter of Rights doesn't say that. It says there's a duty to accommodate disabilities, all disabilities, whether they've got a medical diagnosis is a matter that is not statutorily required. Whether they're complex is not required. So the board's actually giving out incorrect information to people who look at their special ed website. So there's a real need to clear this up. And to the extent the board is saying this to parents, and parents can be equipped to say this to their schools, that can help everybody. Now, we've gobbled up the time that's allocated for this. I think it's important to give staff an opportunity after they absorb all this feedback to come back and give us any take or feedback or ask for questions about the various actions that we're talking about that would be within the school's mandate. the school board's mandate. Whether we need more provincial funding, we all get it. That's not within our authority, and we've already written or co-signed a letter to the minister about that. But I'd like to ask if they could, and with respect to the attendance code, if there is a unique one, as I've been told, tell us what it is. And if they can punch up, if central staff could use that to track how many refusals to admit there have been, or exclusions, soft, hard, medium, rare, well done. But if staff are okay with it, I'm going to suggest we put that also on the June agenda. And we're going to reflect on what to do about refusals to admit. We've got this information. We've got to collectively talk about what we want to do about it, and we're going to deal with that also at a future meeting. Can't say which one yet. And finally, the issue of seclusions and isolation rooms and restraints are ones we have not asked the staff to tell us about board policy on. I think that if people feel that's an important one, you'd like to flip me emails. It may not be till a fall meeting, but I'll work out what's convenient with the staff to come and brief us so we know what their policy is, what their practice is, and then we can have a further discussion, because these are all important. So let me thank all of you, both of you, for coming. Thank all of you for your feedback on it. And let's, I'm going to move to our next agenda item. We're a couple of minutes behind, but Nandy, I'm going to give you both leadership report and your special education plan amendments are both your turf. So take it away and use the time you need.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you. As you know, each year, the ministry requires school boards to review their special education plan and, if needed, to make amendments. So our annual process is to seek feedback from staff, families, SEAC as well. And then we produce the amendments document. That document is taken to the Board of Trustees for approval. However, in a consultative manner, we've shared it with SEAC. And while we're not going to go through all of the amendments, there are a couple that we would like to bring forward today. So I'll pass it over to System Superintendent Debbie Donsky. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. So we're going to draw your attention to the changes to class size. In fact, the first area is the diagnostic kindergarten. Previously, it had up to 8 students, and we are moving to 10 students. It's important to understand this is distinct from the other changes because the diagnostic kindergarten is a TDSB structure and not something that the Ministry of Education asks us to offer. The reason we've moved to 10 students is to ensure that there are spaces for all students as we are reviewing SEPRC processes throughout the board, and to be able to accommodate student requests or family requests for the DK where they qualify with criteria. The next area of change you will see with the mild intellectual disability classes. Previously, we had indicated primary at 12 students, junior at 14, and intermediate at 16. We have moved to the only change, primary remains at 12 cap, intermediate remains at 16, but junior also moves to 16. And this is in line with the Ministry of Education class caps. With learning disabilities, previously in our special education plan, we indicated a range where primary showed 10 to 12, junior 12 to 14, and intermediate 14 to 16. And now we've just put it at 12 students. So we've removed the range, 14 students at the junior level and 16 students at the intermediate level, again, to align to Ministry of Education class caps.
Thank you. So just, I wanted to clarify a couple of pieces. It's important to understand that while we are putting the so I wanted to just let everyone know that even though we do have the class size caps listed in the special education plan, that we actually go student by student, class by class for our ISPs, school by school. And as Deb shared, many of those class size caps were already aligned with ministry class size caps. And to be consistent, we're aligning the rest of them. I want to be clear that oftentimes, especially in our congregated sites, based on needs, we don't actually go to the class size caps based on needs. We look at individual needs of students and also the combination of needs of students within a class. So it doesn't look exactly the same for every DDISP, for example, or for every LDISP. Thank you.
Okay, before we open it to question, or sorry, can we open it to questions now, or is there more you want to present?
Can I just add before we go to questions, because I'm anticipating some of the questions might be, is this a way to reduce costs, staff? I can read minds. We're getting a visual confirmation across the way for those who are not in the room. We have committed, and I reinforce that the investment in special education for staffing that, and I can only speak, of course, to what has gone out. The staffing levels that exist across the system now have already been committed to be the same next year. And I'll ask Nandy to talk about the number of new ISPs that we are opening next year. What this will enable us to do is to be resourcing the system more equitably across the district, particularly for students who are not in ISPs, who are mainstream. It may not be classroom educators, teachers that we would be dispatching. It may be SNAs, EAs. We are, again, looking at a funding level that is remaining the same, and we're looking at all of the supports across the district and think that there is a way for us, again, to be servicing all students. This is not, in our minds at all, a reduction of program supports and services. And if I could just ask Nandy to give you some data on the number of ISPs that are increasing for next year. There's
benefit of everybody. Can you define what an ISP?
Yeah, thanks, David, for that prompt. It is an intensive support program. It's a contained class. And what I'll say is in TDSB, from my experience and observation of my lived years as an administrator, we have many, many parents who are seeking a placement within an ISP or a contained class environment. And of course, that is an option that is discussed at IPRCs, and we are always wanting to be respectful of parent preference. Nandy?
Thank you. So as Louise stated, we are committed to maintaining the levels of supports for students across the district. Our staffing process is the same every year. We look at all the needs across the entire district for all students with disabilities or special education needs. And that would be in both self-contained full-time special education classes as well as integrated classes and students whose families have chosen those settings for their children. So we do take very seriously the responsibility of best utilization of the existing staffing that we have to allocate to in response to the needs across the district of all students. With regards to the class size caps, the other piece I wanted to share is that that is not impacting on support staff. We're talking about the ratio, the ministry class size cap is teacher to student ratio. And we in TDSB actually have quite high levels of support staffing or support for students. So whether that's ISBs in an integrated site or ISBs in a congregated site. And we also need to have support staff such as CYWs, educational assistants, and SNAs in our integrated sites as well. So I wanted to bring that support staff piece into the conversation as well. With regards to opening of new ISBs, we're still in the process. Please know that a few years ago, We did receive funding to be able to do work over the summer. So we actively find staff who are willing to work over the summer to do additional SEPRCs and IPRCs. And so we are in a position where we're always looking into the fall as well at opening ISBs. I don't have definitive numbers, but as of today, the conversation with special education staff was around opening 12 new developmental disabilities ISPs, as well as 8 new ASD, autism ISPs. And we still are also looking at opening additional LD, MID, and other ISPs. So there is not a plan in TDSB to close ISPs or to reduce ISPs. We're being responsive to needs across the district in different settings. Thanks.
So 2 more points, and David, over to you for the speakers list. Point 1 is that these changes will be reflected in the special education plan, which comes before SEAC, obviously into the board for approval annually, and then to the ministry for their approval as well. And secondly, we're wanting to ask SEAC in your advisory role for your advice in regards to any communication beyond the special education plan that you think will be necessary for families, and are there any other professional development or other supports that you think would ensure that this change will continue to support students in the very best of our ability? Thank you.
We've got 3 speakers and me. We are going to run up against 9 o'clock and ruining my, 4. And this is too time sensitive. So I am going to suggest that we plan to extend the meeting by maximum of 10 to 15 minutes if people are agreeable. I don't really need a vote on that. I'm happy to just do it as fast as we can. To staff, I may misunderstand you, but it sounds like I'm hearing 2 opposite statements. On the one hand, we're not cutting levels of staff. And that's a commitment that you've made firmly, repeatedly, categorically on the issue of the budget generally. And we appreciate that. But on the other hand, we're saying by raising these caps, I gather that some intensive support disability classes that previously a student would have had 14 students in will next year have 16 in. And that by any external view would look like a cut. I totally get that you want to reallocate staff where you can to get the most impact for the most students. And I totally sympathize that it's not easy. But it sounds like you're saying 2 opposite things. And either I'm misunderstanding it or we got a problem. So can you help me out?
Yep. Thank you, David. So I would say that yes, for some classes, we will be assuming the upper part of the range that's already been articulated in our special education plan, and setting a higher ratio for DK, which is not part of the Ministry of Education's stipulations in the reg. And all of our classes are, again, aligned to ministry expectations. So what you are suggesting as a cut, because perhaps we're adding 2 more students to a class, the commitment remains that that investment, so across the district, we may have a need for 3 fewer teachers. I'm just making that number up. I don't know if that's in any way in a ballpark. But that investment of teachers would be reinvested in other ways of staffing like SNAs, EAs, again, as we look at the profiles of all of our students in all of their environments, again, staffing levels or investment the same, but we're wanting to look at students who are receiving less support, particularly in mainstream settings, that we're wanting to add additional allocation, if that makes sense.
Okay, our other speakers are Leo, Nora, Jessica, and Isabella. In that order, Leo.
Thanks. Increasing access to ISPs is good, but increasing class sizes is not good. It's really that simple. The issue is that 14 is already a lot for MID. We hear that all the time from parents. I speak to a lot of MID parents and they all say how chaotic 14 MID kids are in the classroom. And likewise for DK. We just had a delegation today, eloquently explained the lived experience of improper class sizes, and now we hear this news about the increases. So I just want to formally register that Autism Ontario expresses our concern and strong opposition to the recent increases in the class sizes to both the diagnostic kindergarten program and the junior mild intellectual disability program. These programs serve students with significant and often complex needs, and we know that smaller class sizes are a key factor in providing the individualized attention and support that they require. Can staff please explain what additional supports, such as staffing, training, or resources, will be put in place to ensure that students' IEP goals continue to be met effectively without compromising quality of programming? And second question, will the board be collecting and publicly reporting data on the impact of these class size changes? For example, student progress, IEP goal attainment, parent and student satisfaction and engagement, so that we can evaluate whether these larger class environments are actually working? Thank you.
Okay, for benefit of Nandy, Louise, and Debbie, do you mind if I get our other speakers to speak? Can you keep track of what you're asked? And to the extent you can, just sort of answer it all at the end. And if anything's left out, people could pipe up.
Certainly, David. And we might also answer in writing to the questions that are
Sure.
posed, whatever is
If you
easier for
can't
you.
do it on the spot, if you can't, obviously, if you need time to prep.
Sounds good.
Totally good. Nora?
Thanks. So I guess I have three things. My first one is, I think you need to rename the learning disability class, not learning disability, because Reg 298 says it's 8. And MID is one that has 12 and 16, not LD. So if it's mixed bag, so if it's multiple exceptionalities, it's 16, but LD is pretty specific. I'm looking at it right now, pretty specifically says 8. So I think like if you have students that have language or exceptional language impairment, exceptional LD, and they're sharing a class, that's more than just LD, right? So LD is definitely 8 from what I'm reading. So I would just double check that because maybe you want to call it a communication class where you have multiple exceptionalities in it and that changes it, but that's an inaccurate reflection of what LD ministry says. Multiple, so just to reinforce what I learned tonight, and I looked up multiple and I looked up the ONSIS data we had from 2 years ago because that's the last time I think I saw ONSIS data, and it does say 0. 0 in that exceptionality. So if we're not going to do it, then don't tell the public we did do it. So to this gentleman's point, either we're supporting it and we do multiple and multiple is a choice, but if we're not identifying it and we're not using it, I feel like it's not fair to the community to be telling them that that we do offer that and it doesn't exist because you're not going to operationalize it. So I appreciate your fiscal restraints and I get it. Like I wasn't actually going to pick about that because I'm waiting for the ministry to show up to go guns a-blazing at them. But I do feel it's important to be transparent. And if we're not using something, you can't put it in there and say we do it when we don't do it. And then my last one would be my association would probably fire me if I didn't speak to increasing ISPs. So I'm very humbled today by our presenters and our delegates and I can't speak to everybody's lived experience. No way. And it's not my job to. But what I can do is I have tried to help families who do not want ISPs because I've committed to helping them get what they wanted. And that's what our association's about. And it's a hell of a fight. So if you guys are so overcrowded, how come your staff are trying to put kids who don't want to be there in them? I've got families who don't want ISPs and staff are making it pretty hardcore for us to be in one.
Okay, Thank you very much. Jessica.
I'll be brief because we've had these issues covered very well by our delegate today, by Leo, by Nora, by Richard, and by Isabella. When we talk about maintaining levels, we need to think about whose perspective we're taking. Would the families of children in those classes agree that their educational opportunities have not been cut when they've been moved from a class of 8 students to 10 students or 6 students to 8 students? I understand that the board is dealing with budgetary constraints. I understand that we're dealing with a province that likes to pretend that inflation doesn't exist and that the value that we can purchase with the same dollars doesn't change. But I think as a school board, we really need to center the students that we're serving. Do the students in these classes get the same services, or are they getting less services by virtue of the fact that there are simply more students that need to share the same resources? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Isabella.
Thank you. All I can say is that I've been told that with congregated sites that used to receive funding allocation of teachers for 6 students per teacher, which actually follows with the regulation. And I just want to clarify one thing, that multiple exceptionalities is different than having students with different exceptionalities in the same class. Students with different exceptionalities in one class can have up to 16, there can be up to 16 pupils. But with multiple exceptionalities, when a student has multiple exceptionalities, it's on the basis that they're interconnected. And what's important about that is that you can't just think of them treating those things separately. So for example, all the congregated sites are designated right now as developmental disabilities. And for those, it's 10 students. But many of them also have autism and are aphasic. And you cannot distinguish between their developmental disabilities, epilepsy, autism, and other medically fragile conditions. And this is why the ministry has specifically indicated that there shouldn't be more than 6 students in those classes. So to schools like Beverly and Lucy McCormick to now only get the support to have the teachers in a class that will be now of 8 students. It makes it very difficult, even with support staff. This is forcing some of these schools not to be actually able to take on new students because it won't be safe. And educational assistants are very important, but their expertise is not the same as the teachers. So I'm very happy that you are trying to distribute resources and are very cognizant that so many more students need the support. But there has to be another way of dealing with this and requesting more money, because you will be underserving these students who are right now being, I would say, identified by being only put in one category that, and it, anyways, that's
All
the
right.
only thing I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can try to, because we are over time, and I want to both be sensitive to the importance of the subject and also offer staff something concrete out of this, you are required, not you personally, TDSB is required to consult us on the special education plan, which you are doing. You're bringing to our attention a change, which we very much appreciate. I think you've heard resoundingly that there is serious concern about this. And I think it would be appropriate to note in the special education plan that there were serious concerns and objections raised by SEAC to these proposed changes. We don't vote on the plan. We don't have a veto on the plan. We give input. But I believe that that's what you're hearing. Just to add briefly, I know of 2 congregated schools that had each their own vice principal, and the families have been notified publicly that next year there will be 1 vice principal between the 2 of them. One of the 2 schools is also taking on a whole new program and expansion of the number of students. Working on the fortuitous assumption that vice principals working in these specialized sites don't spend 50% of their day twiddling their thumbs and so on, that they're working hard and they have important roles to play, working with the most complex students and assisting families in things like individual education plans and so on, and IPRCs and so on. I can't imagine that that will not involve some measure of diminished support for students and families. It's just impossible. They're not just pushing paper all day. Again, aware that you're trying to find cuts somewhere, but in a world where the indication is support will not be reduced, a commendable commitment, there's at least a basis for being concerned about whether that's actually going to materialize. But I think the safest, it would be good to have a longer conversation about this and to get your answer either now or later on these issues. But I think at the very least, it would be fair, and my colleagues, I don't think we need a formal motion unless anybody feels otherwise, to simply register. We can note the minutes, and if staff can include in the report, in the special education plan, that this step is being made, that we are briefed on it, and that serious concerns about it were raised by SEAC. Louise, at this point, and given the hour, do you folks want to address this now? We can address it next meeting. I want to make sure we leave time for the leadership report. It's up to you.
Thank you very much, David. You are very correct in that we are fulfilling our duty in letting you know transparently that there is an operational change that we are intending and putting before board for approval. We appreciate the feedback, and we will continue to have discussion, I have no doubt, with individual members in SEAC at large. Thank you.
Okay, on to the leadership report. Nandy?
Thank you. I think just in terms of us being over for time, the leadership report was shared, and I think I'll use my time in case there are any questions, David, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Instead of going through.
Questions for staff?
And if not, I do want to draw attention to one event that we're hosting Wednesday, if I can find it here. So on Wednesday, we will be hosting a graduation fair for students with disabilities, special education needs, and their families. And it's about preparing students for graduation and life beyond school, TDSB school. It's an in-person event on May 14th from 5 to 8 p.m. And we will have a variety of information booths, community support services, post-21 programs, employment assistance agencies, and other academic institutions and accessibility services offices. The event will be taking place, it was shared out at Avondale school, and we do welcome walk-ins as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of association reports that have been circulated in writing. Are there any association or trustee reports? Not. Sorry, go ahead.
I sent a written summary. I would just highlight that trustees have been working towards information packages, easy snippets for the public to be able to advocate for education funding with a number of key areas like special education, mental health, and school safety, where we are severely underfunded, and actually all school boards are severely underfunded. So if you are hopefully want to bounce that out to your communities for advocacy, we have a number of resources that I can share for social media, for writing letters, that sort of thing. So.
All right, thank you very much. Anything else, or are we good to adjourn? I think we're good to adjourn. I want to thank you all. We've dealt with a series of really emotionally tough issues that are important for our kids that we're here to advocate for. And I appreciate everybody's contributions and working together, and staff for supporting our work. And to staff, if I want to fast track our motion to the trustees that we passed, since I don't want to be talking to them about it in September when the budget's already done. So anything we could do about that, and any assistance I could get to be connected with the provincial investigators so I can share that motion with them and our strong feelings on the subject, I welcome your help. Thanks all. A motion to adjourn, anybody? Leo? Jessica seconding, all in favor? If anybody opposes, I don't care. See you next month. Thanks, everybody.